My Antonia, Chapter 4. On the afternoon of that same Sunday, I took my first long ride on my pony under Otto's direction. After that dude and I went twice a week to the post office 6 miles east of us, and I saved the men a good deal of time by riding on errands to our neighbors. When we had to borrow anything or to send about word that there would be preaching at the sod schoolhouse, I was always the messenger. Formerly, Otto attended to such things after working hours. All the years that have passed had not dimmed my memory of that first glorious autumn. The new country lay open before me. There were no fences in those days, and I could choose my own way over the grass uplands, trusting the pony to get me home again. Sometimes I followed the sunflower-bordered roads. Otto told me that the sunflowers were introduced into that country by the Mormons, that at that time of the persecution, when they left Missouri and struck out into the wilderness to find a place where they could worship God in their own way, the members of the first exploring party crossing the plain to Utah scattered sunflower seed as they went. The next summer, when the long trains of wagons came through with all the women and children, they had the sunflower trail to follow. I believe that botanists do not confirm Jake's story, but insist that the sunflower was native to those plains. Nevertheless, the legend had stuck in my mind, and sunflower-bordered roads always seemed to me the roads to freedom. I used to love to drift along the pale yellow cornfields, looking for the damp spots one sometimes found at the edges, where the smart weeds soon turned a rich copper color, and the narrow brown leaves hung curled like cocoons about the swollen joints of the stem. Sometimes I went south to visit our German neighbors and to admire the Catapla Grove, or to see the big elm tree that grew up out of the deep cracks in the earth and had a hawk's nest in its branches. Trees are so rare in that country, and they had to make such a hard fight to grow, that we used to feel anxious about them and visit them as if they were persons. It must have been the scarcity of detail in that tawny landscape that made detail so precious. Sometimes I rode north in the big prairie dog town to watch the brown earth owls fly home in the late afternoon and go down to their nests underground with the dogs. Antonia and Shimerdas liked to go with me, and we used to wonder a great deal about the birds of subterranean habit. We had to be on our guard there, for rattlesnakes were always lurking about. They came to pick up an easy living among the dogs and owls, which were quite defenseless against them, took possession over their comfortable houses, and ate the eggs and puppies. We felt sorry for the owls. It was always mournful to see them come flying home at sunset and disappear under the earth. But after all, we felt winged things who would live like that must be rather degraded creatures. The dog town was a long way from any pond or creek. Otto said he had seen populous dog towns in the desert where there were no surface water for 50 miles. He insisted that some of the holes must go down to water, nearly 200 feet hereabouts. Antonia said she didn't believe it, that the dogs probably lapped up in the dew in the early morning like the rabbits. Antonia had opinions about everything, and she was soon able to make them known. Almost every day she came running across the prairie to have her reading lesson with me. Mrs. Shimerdas grumbled, but realized it was important that one member of the family should learn English. When the lesson was over, we used to go up to the watermelon patch behind the garden. I split the melons with an old corn knife, and we lifted out the hearts and ate them with the juice trickling from our fingers. The white Christmas melons we did not touch, but we watched them with curiosity. They were to be picked late, when the hard frost had set in, and put away for winter use. After weeks on the ocean, the Shimerdas were famished for fruit. The two girls would wander for miles along the edge of the cornfields, hunting for ground cherries. Antonia loved to help grandmother in the kitchen and learn about cooking and housekeeping. She would stand beside her, watching her every movement. We were willing to believe that Miss Shimerdas was a good housewife in her own country, but she managed poorly under the new conditions. The conditions were bad enough, certainly. I remember how horrified we were at the sour, ashy gray beard she gave her family to eat. She mixed her dough, we discovered, in an old tin peak measure that Kajik had used about the barn. When she took the paste out to bake it, she left smears of dough sticking on the sides of the measure, put the measures on the shelf behind the stove, and let this residue ferment. The next time she made bread, she scraped the sour stuff down into the fresh dough to serve as yeast. During those first months, the Shimerdas never went down. Kerchik encouraged them in the belief that the Black Hawk they would somehow be mysteriously separated from their money. They hated Kerchik, but they clung to him because he was the only human being with whom they could talk or from whom they could get information. He slept with the old man and the 2 boys in the dugout barn, along with the oxen. They kept him in their hole and fed him for the same reason that the prairie dogs and the brown owls housed the rattlesnakes, because they did not know how to get rid of him.